welcome to Musical Talk. My name is David Kingsmill, and this week we're going to be continuing on from my last show talking about the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, and with the theme, I hope, of helping a few people to maybe make their shows a little bit more successful, or indeed just to understand exactly what it is to take a show to the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. As with last time, we're going to be hearing from a group of people that I spoke to while I was up at the Edinburgh Fringe in August of 2012. Later on in this podcast, we will be hearing from Kakoa Kaluhia-Kalani, who is the artistic director of Griffin Venues, one of the newer venues and yet staffed by veterans, and one which I performed at in 2011, with 2 different shows. And also from Peter Michael Marino, the writer of the flop musical Desperately Seeking Susan, and the follow-up success story at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, Desperately Seeking the Exit. You will also hear a little more from myself as I discuss some of the things that I observed while I was up there, mistakes that I made or witnessed, or things that I think maybe could do with a few guidelines about how to go about doing them before you go up, based, of course, on my own experiences. First of all, we're going to hear from Mark Fisher. He is a journalist, the writer of the Edinburgh Fringe Survival Guide, and also the host of the semi-talk shows, I suppose, the Edinburgh Fringe Survival Guide Live, which was a series that he did at the Edinburgh Fringe in 2012, which I sincerely hope gets done again, and which I recommend you go to if you can. I also recommend that you look at his book, the Edinburgh Fringe Survival Guide itself, which is a fantastic tome for anybody who is planning on taking a show up. I apologise in advance for the quality of the sound in some of these recordings. Due to the fact that these are very busy people, I had to catch them whenever I could, and recordings were done outside or in busy venues, etc., for both of my episodes. But please do bear with them, as I do think there is a lot of very, very interesting information in here, whether you're planning on taking a show to the Fringe or not. So without further ado, I leave you in the capable hands of Mark Fisher. So I am sitting here with Mark Fisher, freelance journalist and writer of the Edinburgh Fringe Survival Guide, who I have also just seen presenting one of 6 Edinburgh Fringe Survival Guide live shows with panels discussing various aspects of the Fringe. Now, with your sort of angle on the Fringe, you must have seen quite a lot of shows rise and fall over the course of your years working at the Fringe. What would you say? From the outset, I think the most important thing that people worry about is, how are we going to be a success? And this is something that we've actually just been listening to in this show. How would you say is a good mentality for somebody coming up to the Fringe for the first time to think, okay, how am I going to define my show as successful?
I think it's in that very phrase you just used, which is to define success, and everybody has a different definition of success. There are a million different definitions you could choose, and none of them is right, none of them is wrong, but it's very important for you to know what your definition is. So, for example, if this doesn't apply for one-man shows, unless you're very in a very bad way, but if, for example, you were a student company and you wanted to get drunk every night, then that could be a perfectly reasonable thing to want to do. You're just here for a bit of a laugh, do a bit of a show, maybe a sketch comedy, something like that, and then hit the bars and have a great time in Edinburgh, which is a big party city at this time of year. Many other people would prefer to be doing something much more serious and worthy, and they'd be looking for a tour in the autumn and a producer to pick up on them. It doesn't really matter what your definition is. For the people who want to get drunk, their definition of success is, yeah, we got drunk 22 nights on the trot. They will be happy with that. That's their definition of success. But if they know that that's what they want to do, then why would they spend £1,000 on a publicist? Because the publicist isn't going to get them any more drunk. The publicist is only going to take £1,000 from them. So therefore, if you know why you're what it is that you're looking for, then a lot of other decisions that will follow very logically. So work out what it is that you're trying to get from the Fringe. So in the case of a one-person show, it might just be to be getting the experience of what it's like to do a show for maybe 21, 22 nights on the trot, or a week, or however long you choose to be here. That might in itself, just as a piece of professional development, be a sufficient target. So in that sense, as long as you get some people to come along to see your show, and as long as you don't go hugely overdrawn or whatever, as long as you sort of roughly balance your books, then then the experience of just doing the show, maybe seeing other people's shows, learning from other people's shows, maybe that is your definition of success. Recently I spoke to a student involved in the Bedlam Theatre who said that last year he did a puppet show, and his definition of success was that he invited a professional puppeteer along to see his show, and he took him out for a drink for a quick pint after the show, and gave him some puppeteering tips. That was what he wanted to get out of that experience, and that was the thing that meant most to him. Not the audiences, not the show, but the opportunity to develop his skill and his craft in future years. So I can't tell you what your definition of success is, but I know that if you have a clear idea of what it is that you want, then all sorts of questions about how much you spend on various items, such as accommodation, flyering, and so on. All of those things will sort of not become easy, but they become easier because you know why you're there, and you can make those decisions on the basis of that knowledge.
Sure. And I've heard a few companies around this year, and I remember from last year as well, saying, well, we weren't quite sure if our show was ready before we came up. Now, obviously, I think that it's perfectly acceptable to come up to the Fringe with the concept of, okay, this show is in a workshop stage. We want to present it to a Fringe audience, see how it goes down and work on it, and so on. But I know some companies want to come up with a piece of perfection. Is there a state that can be defined as ready, or is ready simply you're in the Fringe and playing?
It's very, very difficult, isn't it? If you take the example of Blackwatch, which is one of, not just in Scotland, one of Britain's greatest theatrical successes. The National Theatre of Scotland produced a play called Blackwatch in 2006, and it is still on tour now. It's gone all over the world. It's about the Blackwatch Regiment and the involvement in Iraq, done on a very, very big scale, much bigger than a one-man show would ever be. But it has been an international success, and one of the most talked about production in Scotland, certainly since John McGrath's TV at the Stag of the Black Oil in the 1970s, and so an unqualified success. And if you speak to John Tiffany, the director, about what it felt like before opening night or before the first previews, they didn't know what they had on their hands. They were quite ready for a complete flop. They thought it was because the material was very much Gregory Burt, the playwright, was involved in it and wrote a script, but it was very much a collection of ideas that were being put together rather than a ready-made script that was complete. And so, if a show like that can be a major success and the writers didn't know what they had on their hands, or the creators didn't know what they had on their hands, then of course it will happen on the Fringe that suddenly you realise that you have a show that everybody likes, and it's only when you put it in front of an audience that you can discover that. So yes, there should be room for experimentation, but I suppose maybe that should be part of your expectation. We're doing something a little bit unusual, untested, uncertain, and we will take the opportunity to develop it while we're on the Fringe. We won't worry if we get poor reviews, because that is part of the process. Maybe you could take that view, but it certainly is a lot easier if you can believe in your show. And I suppose you could believe your show was an experimental thing that was a work in progress. I mean, that's justified. But if I know from myself and my own show that when I've been out flyering to try and get people to come and see my show, it's very easy for me to try and persuade people to come because I believe in my show. I think I've got a good thing, and I can become a great advocate for it without having to pretend that I'm selling something that isn't worth selling. So you could be making things harder for yourself. Certainly, if you have a choice of two shows and you know one of them to be good and one of them you don't think is very good, well, why would you bring the not very good one? If success for you is finding a producer for the autumn to do a tour in the autumn, something like that, then you're probably not going to achieve success if the work is untested. So those are things that you have to wrestle with, and there's not a black or white answer, because you could have a Blackwatch on your hand, and that would be fantastic if you do.
Absolutely. Well, there's a couple of times now you've mentioned scale in terms of one-man shows. This sounds like a slightly odd question, but how big should a one-man show be? And I ask that in terms of, I've had a couple of responses from different people I've spoken to, and I've said, should you have, for example, a PR agent? And one person said yes, and one person said no. And obviously it partly depends on the scale that you're working to. But of an average one-man show, if you could have such a thing, what sort of team do you think a one-man show should have?
Straight away, my mind's gone off on a tangent because I can think some of the best one-man shows I've seen are by Robert Lepage, the Quebecois theatre director and an actor, and his one-man shows are it's like watching a whole army of people because he's very good at taking on different characters and he has huge budgets to enable him to do various sort of tricks and so on that make it feel like a much bigger than a one-man show. That's not the question you're asking though. In terms of the Fringe, it depends again on your expectations. That if you think about it in terms of, if you move into the world of comedy, then the Edinburgh is full right now of one-man shows, one-woman shows. Stand-up comedy is a very, very big part of the scene, and a lot of those people will be have an ambition to get a television series, to keep on gigging all year round in London and so on, and they can use Edinburgh as a sort of platform to raise their profile beyond the Fringe. So certainly for them, their budget, if you're thinking purely monetary terms, their budget for August is actually the budget for a whole year, or maybe even 5 years. It can be part of a 5-year plan or a year-long plan. So losing money in August is not really the issue. What's important is by December you've got your money back a year later or whatever. So that could be one way of analysing it. There are stories of people who realise that having taken on an agent, having taken on a publicist, having taken on a technician, they're in a room that only has 40 seats, and even if they sell out every single performance, they're still going to lose money, and it wouldn't be physically possible to break even on that. So you have to be careful that it's possible to get your money back, and you have to remember that budgeting for 30% audiences is reasonable. Certainly don't budget for 60, 70, 80% audiences. Lovely if you get them, but you certainly can't guarantee that. So yes, a scale. I mean, the advantage of a one-person show is that it is just you doing it. And you can do it as small as you like. The disadvantage of doing it as very, very small is that you're very, very vulnerable. That there is just you, and there's the audience, and there's your material and the audience, and the reviews come in, and they're a review of you, and there's nobody else you can blame. You can't blame the director, you can't blame the writer if you've done your own material. You have no. You're very vulnerable, you're very thin-skinned in that situation. So having a network of social friends, if you don't have a network of professional allies, could be to your advantage in that situation.
And on the subject of reviews, obviously reviews are important to the Fringe in the sense that, if possibly even slightly overrated in terms of how people treat them, you get 5-star reviews plastered all over posters, over flyers, you get 4-star reviews, you get whatever, and to a certain extent that will automatically sway public opinion because of human nature. If there's a 4-star or a 5-star show and a flyer with nothing on it, you know that the 4-star, 5-star one has been appreciated by somebody already. How important do you think it should be for particularly new companies who maybe don't know how animalistic the Fringe can be at times, particularly with reviews? How important do you think people should make their reviews and trying to get reviews early?
Coming back to that thing of what it is you're looking for, if you're looking for an autumn tour, then having a good set of reviews can be very valuable for that. If you're looking to get audiences in, reviews can be to your advantage if they're positive. Because you can get the review and then you can photocopy the star rating or whatever it is, append it to your flyer and go out and tell people and say, hey, 3 weeks gave me 4 stars or whatever. That can be useful as a way of generating audiences. It isn't something that these days you can't just sit back and say, oh, fantastic, I've got a great review in the Scotsman, I can rest easy.
Absolutely.
Because there is now such a weight of reviews that are out there. There are free sheets, there are blogs, websites, as well as all the traditional media. A lot of people are covering it, and it's for a regular audience member, it's getting as confusing for them to understand what's going on. What those reviews mean. Almost as complicated as to do that as it is to go through the Fringe programme and work out what their choice is. So they're overwhelmed with choice already, and then they're overwhelmed with reviews. So you have to use your reviews quite strategically, and then go out and find your audience and say, look, this credible reviewer in the Scotsman or the Guardian or wherever it may be said my show was fantastic. Come and see it. But so it can be good for reviews. It can be good for your life beyond the Fringe. But it can also be disorientating, and it can also give you messages that confuse you and puzzle you and offend you. And you probably, if you are doing a show on your own, then some people would advise you not to read the reviews at all.
Yeah, and the other thing is, of course, that you walk past somewhere like the Underbelly in Bristow Square, and everything is plastered with reviews, and you almost wonder, well, what is their effectiveness when every single, or virtually every single poster on that entire wall has got 4 and 5 stars slapped on it?
Yeah, exactly.
At which point it becomes rather a moot point, and you get back to square one, where essentially every review has cancelled every other review out, and the shows go back to, word of mouth again, really, which I think has to be about the most important thing on the Fringe, doesn't it?
I think word of mouth is crucially important, because if you've got, it's a sort of combination of things. If you as a potential audience goer has seen something on Facebook, maybe came across a tweet, saw a flyer, and then your friend tells you, hey, I saw this great show, then it's just that extra trigger, and probably your friend telling you that show is good is going to be the most influential, because you trust your friend, you know your friend's tastes and so on, whereas all those other things are reinforcing a general message. So I don't think you can rely on any one thing, but I think you're right. Word of mouth is, if you've got a good show, people like it, or even if you've got a moderate show, there'll probably be a certain percentage of people who really like it, and if you can use those and encourage those people to go and tell their friends, then that can be great for you.
Sure. And taking up slightly from your last sentence to the previous question about one-man shows and not reading reviews and things, one of the things that was just covered in the live event that I've just seen that you hosted was the concept of having a support team around you who are actually able to help. Now, for a one-man show, I'm actually in the possibly slightly unenviable position in the sense of I'm a one-man show who's quite literally up here on his own, and the support team that I've now got has actually been generated from the companies I've made friends with while I've been up here. Do you think it's actually important to, perhaps if you are a one-man show, make sure that you have friends that you know are up here and people that you can actually have who could read a review, and if you do get a good one, go, well, here's something to put in your flyer, or can go down to the pub after and chat about the show and say,
yes,
well, this
yes.
is what I think.
And it'll be different for different people, but some people who don't have any interest in the Fringe, maybe call up your uncle or something, and just get that sense of getting a sense of perspective is very different, very difficult in Edinburgh, because everything is so intense and everything does seem to be so important, and so understanding that can be hard. And so yes, talking to other performers, realizing as we were just finding in the session we just did this morning, everybody has this experience of feeling vulnerable, feeling annoyed, feeling depressed, feeling tired, and so on, and just talking to other people and realizing you're not alone. Other people are feeling this, and maybe they're also feeling elation and all the other positive emotions as well, but just sharing experiences in any walk of life is always important, and when you're under the intense pressure and competition and all the rest of it of the Fringe, then that is very important too.
And one thing I think we have to touch on now is, I don't know how much this applies to doing a week show, but certainly if you're doing a 2, and definitely if you're doing a 3, you are going to run into a point probably about halfway through the second week where you suddenly get tired, because this is an even just being in Edinburgh at this point in time is an exhausting process because of everything that's going on around you, and you're running around seeing shows or whatever, but particularly when you're performing as well. Obviously, one of the most important things has got to be to actually look after yourself, specifically for the performers, but in general, because you need to be able to put on a great show when it comes down to your time.
So that might mean getting enough sleep, not drinking too much, taking a trip out to Portobello on the bus, which doesn't take very long, but gives you a view of the sea in the sense that there is life beyond it. Walk up Arthur's Seat. There are a whole load of strategies that you could take just to take your mind off this continual bombardment. But and again, it's the same sort of thing. Remember, you're not alone.
Yes, and of course things like eating healthily and all that kind of thing, and drink lots, which was something that was said in this workshop today. Keep drinking, it's so easy to dehydrate, which, given in a city that rains most of the time, although touch wood we've been lucky this year, it seems like an odd thing to say, but it really does count. And I think also, of course, yes, do remember that there is life outside the Fringe as well, and try and engage with that once in a while, because if you become too bottled in, I think it becomes a problem, doesn't it? You end up with this almost cabin fever, even in a massive city.
Remember, it's not that important. It's important, but it's not that important.
No. So, obviously, here we are at one of the fantastic international and theatre stages of the year. One final thing, one key tip for somebody who is coming up here with a one-man show, and one key tip for a new group, or indeed one person that is coming up here. Maybe the same one, but what would you say would be...
Well, obviously nobody can go without buying the Edinburgh Fringe Survival Guide, available from Amazon and all good bookstores. The book attempts to lay out all of those questions that you will be asking yourself, and central to that is that idea that if you know why you're here, then a lot of decisions are made more easy for you. So knowing why you're here in the first place, not worrying what that reason is, but knowing why it is, I think that's probably the one that I would give to people. And also just to enjoy yourself. It's very easy to focus on the negative aspects. And me as a journalist, I like to try and find out how much did you cry, how depressed did you get. But actually, you have a very good time and really enjoy yourself. And that's partly to do with that idea of perspective as well, because if you have a bit of perspective, you think, well, yeah, it's just a show, it's just a month, let's have a drink and enjoy the tremendous range of opportunity of just seeing other shows as well. I mean, in terms of your education and your professional development, if you are a professional, the opportunity to see the world's greatest artists in Edinburgh is you won't find anywhere else in the world, and you should make the most of that.
Excellent. Well, Mark Fisher, I'm sure you're a very busy man, but thank you very much for giving us the time.
Thank you very much.
I am sitting here with Kakoa Kaluhia-Kalani, who is the artistic director of Griffin Venues, and those of our listeners with a long memory will recall that I was here last year with two different shows, Not So Far to Reach and Hitler the Musical, and that was Griffin Venues' first year on the Fringe.
Very first year.
Indeed. So this is the second, and you are having a very successful Fringe thus far.
It's going well so far for the end of week 2, yes.
First 4-star shows hanging around, a couple of 5-star shows going around as well. I would imagine that there's probably an entirely new podcast in what it's like to be a new venue on the Fringe.
Oh, it can.
But that could be followed on the Griffin website with their build diary. My purpose here is to talk about what it's like for newcomers to the Fringe who haven't been up before, or people who are bringing up one-man shows to the Fringe and therefore have a smaller team, if any team at all. It may just be them. Obviously, this is a venue that's good at bringing new people in. That's something that you've established over your 2 years.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that we thought about when we first put this thing together, is that for the many groups that come along, it's the newness that's, so many new companies, so many first-timers, it's quite an attractive thing to come to, and yet it's a vast ocean, and it can be very, very... people can get lost in the vastness, even though Edinburgh is such a small city.
Yeah. Well, there's however many, I don't know how many, 350 plus venues. I think,
hundreds of venues, 2,400 shows, going over the span of 4 weeks. That is a lot of people, that's a lot of bodies, and a lot of tickets to be sold, a lot of potential tickets to be sold if you can send out the right feelers.
Absolutely. But equally, there's also the challenge that you guys have got, which is how do you pick what shows you're going to put on?
Right.
So, you've got Joe Bloggs, he's written a show, he's got a company together, he wants to come up to the Fringe. He sends an email to Griffin.
Right.
What does he want to say to catch your attention?
Well, one of the first things that we'll do is, because we have an online application, and all the different venues have their various ways of accepting applications. So when people send in their apps, they send in their names, their company, but then it's the description of the show that becomes the kicker about whether or not we feel it's something that's appropriate for us. So, for example, we had made a decision early on that we weren't the kind of venue that would be good for like a one-man stand-up comedy show. It requires a particular kind of venue and a particular kind of apparatus. For example, we don't have a bar here, and one of the things that is essential, I think, for making stand-up comedy work, or even sketch comedy to work, is to have a bar nearby on the premises so that people can get slightly sloshed and then go in, and we just don't have that. And so we decided, well, that's just not something that we can do. And so that's one thing that will almost certainly, I respond and say, well, that's not something we can do well. On the other hand, what we are excited about are things like the new, the unusual, the strange, the freaky, the personal, stuff that stands out as unusual, new work, devised work. That's the kind of things that we have decided that we'd love to pursue. And so Hitler the Musical, for example, it almost sells itself just by the title.
So there's something in that as well. Obviously, know your show before you try and sell it. But what about those companies who perhaps... Because obviously, actually, before I ask that question, when should people start getting in touch with you? When do you book up your final slots?
The formal booking process begins in January, but the first Fringe deadline doesn't come until March. And so usually January to February is a very low traffic period. And that's a really good time to actually start poking your nose into finding venues, because it's a low time, low traffic. The chances are that I as a artistic director have more time to speak with you and chat with you come March, just before that first deadline. It's a firehouse, it's just a flood of applications, and the turnover gets crazy. The second deadline then is in the middle of April, and then a second round of craziness happens. So really, it is a lot better to pop in as early as possible to secure a time that you really like.
Sure. And so back to the question I was about to ask, which is, what happens if you're, a newcomer, your first time up, you've maybe just graduated or whatever, and you're still writing your show, and you haven't quite finished it yet. You're not 100% certain of the story. You're confident it's going to be a good show. You like the look of Griffin. How does somebody sell it to you, having just stressed the importance of the story selling the show? How does someone sell their show to you if it's not quite complete yet?
I don't review scripts, or some people will send scripts, but I just don't read them.
Sure.
I don't have the time.
But I mean, even if you've not got a complete, if they're, and it does happen, if a Fringe show gets to sort of beginning of April and they're thinking, my God, I've got to get this in quickly, and they actually not quite sure how their show's going to finish.
Well, in that sense, the stronger issue is, what is your will to make it here? And for my end of things, as long as you're committed to coming, once you book the show with the venue and then with the Fringe, you do have a couple of months of leeway. This is one of the things that some people aren't always aware of, is that until the Fringe program goes to press, you still have the ability to change the title of your show, change the description of your show. So in some cases, we've done this in the past, where we've told companies, or if a writer has spoken to me, I'll just say, look, just create like a dummy or a shell entry into the Fringe program, and then just keep tabs on when the final going to press deadline is, and then you can massage them. So I've had companies change titles, change descriptions, change direction, change director, up until the moment that it goes to press.
And that is actually about 2 weeks, isn't it, I think, after the deadline for actually registering closes.
Yeah, they've collapsed the deadline quite a bit. Back in the early days when I was doing this, you had like a month or two, and now you're right, it's been shortened to a few weeks.
And that, actually, you've just made a point that we should probably stress for people coming up to Griffin. Although this is a brand new venue, everybody here has wetted their feet before.
Oh yes, I've been doing Fringe since 2005.
Sure. So it is a new venue, but a new venue of experience.
Quite, yes.
What about the one-man side of things? Because you said you don't do stand-up, which is perfectly fair, but obviously you do one-man shows. You have a phenomenal success in progress at the moment with the five-star show I Heart Hamas, which I haven't seen yet, I'm sad to say, but I do plan to see, and with luck I will be speaking to the actress and writer responsible for that a little bit later on. Obviously bringing up a one-man show has its own challenges. What can a one-man show coming up, particularly if they don't have a team, what can they do to make it easier for themselves through the venue, if that makes sense?
I found that the most successful one-man or one-woman shows are the ones who communicate early and often with the venue. And from our end of things, we're happy to dispense as much pre-Fringe advice as we can about getting your show out and about. There are the various means of getting your name out, whether it's the proverbial flyering, which can be quite exhausting for one person, using online and social media particularly, working with people who can, Jenna, for example, I think has hired a publicist to at least do a lot of the publicity legwork, contacting press to come in. And I think even in the case of I Heart Hamas, she's managed to get press almost every night.
Really?
I can think of very few nights where there hasn't been at least one press person.
Sure.
And it helps. Now, the flip side of this is that the one-person show of any sort is just going to have to deal with the fact that the build-up is going to be very slow.
Yeah.
And so it's probably advisable to do at minimum a 2-week run, it's a very, very slow freight train that once it ramps up, it'll get going. I had an experience actually back in 2005 at Rocket Venues where we had a one-man show. He had a chair and a bucket. And he averaged 2 people a night for his first week. I think we even had to cancel one night because no one turned up. And he finally got that reviewer and that review. And it may have even been the Scotsman. This has been so long ago. And that was at week 2. It just took off for him. But it was just having that patience and that forbearance to just sort of stick out what is going to be a slow, torturous process. I mean, unless you're a big name, or unless you're notorious for some reason, it's just going to be you're just going to have to wait for the ramp up.
Yeah. And something else that a newcomer might be slightly taken aback by, particularly if, in the case of more amateur societies, they've been used to getting local press and so on and so forth, reviewing their shows and giving them nice chatty reviews. Some people might be perturbed by the bluntness, in some cases the disparity, particularly between reviews and star ratings, and indeed the whole ethic of the Fringe review process, because it is, in my opinion, from the public's perspective, understandable but also slightly overrated. But it's also a very complicated beast, because it is up to the company, for the most part, to get somebody into their show.
Yeah.
I think we hit the media with Hitler the musical, but there is a certain amount of that will sell itself. But you have to be quite lucky to bounce across something like that. But then somebody comes along and gives you a review, of course reviewer's opinion, but it has to be said, not all Fringe reviews are well written. Not all Fringe reviews are written by people who are experienced reviewers. And not all star ratings are given by reviewers. In some cases, the review is written by one person and the star rating is then assigned by the editor, and so it can bear no relation to what the review actually says. How do you advise new companies to deal with the review process? Because obviously they can get carried away if they get a 5-star straight away, or they could get absolutely knocked if they get a 1 or 2 star straight away.
Yeah. Well, for theatre people, I think understand there's a certain level of thickness of skin that's involved in going into the process, because you're out there, you're exposing your work. Particularly if you're a one-man show, it's your baby. It's the thing that you love so much, that you've worked so hard on. And somewhere along the line, one has to just develop the capacity to weather the good and the bad reviews. And particularly when you're a solo artist out there, there's nowhere else to hide. You can't point to your fellow actor to say, well, you screwed up or that screwed up. It's just you. Yeah. And there's no other way. If I could give a hug to everyone who had to weather a tough review, because that's just the way it is.
Yeah.
So there's that, and it's just getting in those. For me, it's been drawing in the other reviews, more and more reviews, and you'll find that the people will get the range. You'll get the 1, and then you'll get the 5. It's just
sure. And it's also, of course, in the Fringe, you can't not read your reviews. You can't do the old actor's trick of, oh dear, darling, I don't read reviews, because you have to read them. Because if you get a good quote, or if you even in a bad review, you can get good quotes. Yeah. Or if you get a 4 or a 5 star, you have to slap that on your poster straight away. So you can't hide from them.
Now the venue, from our end, our press people in the venue, well, once we tag, or Google tags, whatever, we get those, anything that comes out about our companies will pop up in the morning, and then our press people will, as you can see, will decorate the stars.
Indeed.
And then we'll have companies come in and start stapling, printing small versions of the reviews and stapling them to their flyers and handing them out. So there's that. The Fringe Central, I think, is actually another. For those coming in for the first time, may not know that Fringe Central is actually a wonderful resource to help people, particularly solo. They even have a get-together for solo performers.
They do.
So where you can interact, where you can support each other, give each other advice, and so on. There's also that press activity that was on 2 weekends ago. It's the one I saw.
The Meet the Media.
Yeah, Meet the Media event, which is invaluable.
Yes, it is.
In getting people to actually get to the press right there, and I hope they do this often and frequently.
Yeah, and that's a different tactic, because where you're sending your press releases, you're sending something that's official, and here's my official presentation of my show. Of course, the Meet the Media event gives you a chance to put a face to that show, and you actually sit down with a representative from the Scotsman or the BBC or 3 Weeks or whoever it happens to be and say, here I am, here's my show, let me talk to you about it, instead of just doing it impersonally via email.
Yeah, so just to clarify, whoever may not be familiar what that is, it's an event that happens at Fringe Central. It's a large open room, and then there'll be tables and chairs with signs saying, this is 3 Weeks, this is the Skinny, this is the Scotsman, this is Huffington Post. And then my understanding is they only let 2 representatives per show
That's right.
go to this event.
Yeah.
And then your objective is to get into each one of these queues, get to the head of the queue, and then you have an audience or a brief chat with the actual media representative. Of course, the longest queue, I think, was for the Scotsman, because they're the heaviest hitter.
Always is. And actually, a piece of advice bearing that in mind is if you find yourself going to the Meet the Media event, it starts at 2, usually. Get in the queue at 11.
Yeah.
Sit there for 3 hours. If you're on your own, make friends with another company and get them to hold your space. And if you're in the top 30 or 40 people, go straight to the Scotsman.
Yeah.
Because if you actually want to see them, that's the only way you can do that without blowing out of the water your chances of seeing anybody else.
Yeah. And then it also helps, and again, this is probably the challenge for the solo performer who's come all by him or herself, is that then the next bit, though, is that you have to stand in the queues, and I happened to get into one queue that took me an hour and a half to get to the front. So it was good that we were with someone else to help that. But I went as a representative of the venue as opposed to a representative of the company. So that I was more talking about us and what we do.
Sure. Now, you are obviously an independent venue.
Yes.
You're not like C or the Assembly, who've got multiple spaces all around. In actual fact, it's one of the things that always amazes me about Edinburgh is the variety of venues, because you've got churches that become venues, you've got hotel rooms that become venues, there's a strip club that becomes a venue every year.
There's the caves.
The caves.
Right?
Now, you've taken over, well, several spaces, but for venue purposes, you've got 2 spaces within the Point Conference Centre on Bread Street.
Yeah.
And that's your lot. You're also a little bit further outside Edinburgh than, or sort of round the back streets of Edinburgh, as opposed to some of the bigger venues that are in large clumped areas. Now, obviously one of the things that companies will be concerned with is venue publicity and how much they'll get seen. So what do you guys do to promote your companies? Yeah,
it's one of those, I think, enduring myths about the Edinburgh Fringe is the degree to which location plays a part in drawing people to your show. Now,
Indeed.
I'll go back to Hitler the Musical as a clear example of this. I don't know what the final numbers are, but it may have been the sellout. Did it become a Fringe sellout?
Yes, it was a sellout.
Yeah,
I can't remember what percentage we hit, but I know there were a couple of days I think we actually oversold because a couple of people didn't turn up and we resold the ticket. But I mean that's 81, isn't it? That venue. So that's 81 times 12, whatever that works out as. So that's all 972 people.
Yeah, that's a load. That's a lot of people, and so we're often, a question I'm often asked, I'll sort of probably bracket it this way. One of the questions that I most frequently ask is the degree to which our location affects the capacity of people to draw audience to them. And there really isn't that much of an impact. Even now, we've had sold out shows from last week. And it just, there's so many factors bearing into this. That location, I mean, you'll find fringe venues all around the city, and there's an illusion of being close to the Royal Mile because there's so many people there.
Yeah.
But I will assure you, I've been to shows on the Royal, or I should say, I've been to venues and to shows on the Royal Mile where there's 2 other people there. If it is a factor, it's such a small factor that other things strongly bear into this, and it's publicity.
Sure.
And
And obviously you guys also have the Griffin venue program, so it's not a question of there's nothing put out by the venue to assist. There is the venue program as well, which has all of the Griffin shows in it.
And then we have our website. So we deal in social media as well. So we have a Twitter account, we have our website, we have a Facebook, and so we use that to the extent that we can to help publicize. And we take our venue brochures all around. In fact, behind you can see where the map is, where we chart out where we've brochured. So we do a great deal of publicizing the venue as a whole. We don't have the kind of numbers to assist individual shows.
Of course.
But so we try to sell the venue as a package.
I think that just about wraps us up.
There is one thing I would add, and
sure.
Well, just in addition to the advent of the social media thing is still relatively new, in my mind anyway. I mean, obviously these things have been, there's been lots of Twitter, lots of Facebook, and so on. The degree to which an individual will go out and flyer, I have found in my years of experience that the indiscriminate handing out of a flyer to a passerby is perhaps the least effective way of getting your word out. And so a solo person going on the Royal Mile, you'll see it. You'll see the people flinging flyers at people walking by, handing them, and I assure you, because you'll see this as clear as day, on the either end of that pedestrianized area, the bins filled with flyers that people will drop them into.
Well, I was standing at the bottom of the Royal Mile the other day, standing there chatting to somebody about my show, with my flyers flat out in my hand, and I looked down and somebody had walked past and just put a flyer on top of my pile of my own flyers. So that went straight in the bin without question.
Right. Yeah. Now, on the flip side of this is, and you've kind of mentioned it already, the degree to which you can engage someone, get them to stop and talk to you, and obviously it takes more time, but the chances are you will get that person into your venue, into your show. I know people who have done inventive things with their flyers. I've seen flyers. We had a company who took the time to create little origami flowers out of their flyers, and so when they'd hand the flower out, of course, the person would open it up and there would be the flyer for the venue. I have seen some people will, as you engage with that person, will write 2 for 1 on that flyer, and they say, just take this to the box office and things like that. And the more you're able to do that on that level, it increases, I would say, exponentially.
Sure.
The chance. And we have companies who are out every day, and in some cases 90% of their day's attendance will come from that. So I don't want to diminish the mile and flyering, but it's the way that you do it.
Yeah, agreed. I'm sitting here with Peter Michael Marino, who is the writer of the flop musical Desperately Seeking Susan.
I am.
And the seemingly rather successful follow-up, which is the monologue Desperately Seeking the Exit,
Yes,
which
correct.
is at Edinburgh this year.
Yes.
Which is the writing of which is about the writing of the flop musical Desperately Seeking Susan.
That is correct.
If you can follow all that.
Yeah.
And you are on in one of the Laughing Horse free Fringe
I
venues,
am, yes.
which is also different to the other people I've spoken to for this podcast, because they've all been paid shows.
Right, lucky them.
And obviously, listeners, again, you will have picked up from the accent that Peter is also not English,
So not English.
but it comes from America. So, first of all, I think one question I just need to get out of the way, which isn't quite the gear of this podcast, but having had a flop musical, what made you decide to write about writing a flop musical?
I don't know if I decided to do it. I think it told me to do it.
Okay.
I kept a really detailed blog of the whole experience of writing the musical that I shared with very, very few people. And about a year ago, I revisited it. I read it from beginning to end, which is many, 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 many pages, web pages. And reading it, I was kind of struck by my own story about how I could see my optimism and thrill and delight of, just had lunch with Debbie Harry, just had dinner with MGM Studios who granted the rights, wonderful things. First day of casting, oh my God, we saw 250 people this week. It just kept going on and on, all these great experiences. But then it sort of reaches a point where we're in previews and I'm writing things like, oh, I'm worried about the show. Oh, it's not getting reactions. Oh, I'm doing all these changes. Oh, everyone is changing my script without asking me. Oh, we're doomed. And then, right through to, opening night party, fantastic, to next morning, here are the worst reviews I've ever gotten in my life. To, well, I can't really give away too much. Well, I don't know when people will be listening to this, but I plan to come back next year doing the show again. So
this will be around November time.
All right, well, there is a silver lining to the whole thing. And hopefully by the time I come back next year, there'll be an extra silver lining to the whole thing. So, yeah, in reading this, and also in just talking to so many people over the years who are just fascinated by, the idea that somebody could write a musical that was on the West End, especially me. There's just so many stories that I just felt like I had to tell the story in some way. I mean, in all honesty, I haven't acted in 10 years. I acted for a very long time. I was in Stomp for 5 years, and that was the end of my acting career, because I just sort of after you're playing to 3,000 people a night for X amount of years, your cup is full. And I just wanted to get back to writing and not performing. But now that I've done this, and so I was trying to find actors to play me in this monologue.
Okay.
But everybody I gave it to said, there's no way I can do this. You have to tell your own story, which of course makes sense, but since I was so terrified of A, telling the story, because you'd have to drop a lot of names, and, B, acting again, I was terrified, but I found the right director, John Clancy, who's a veteran of the Fringe and has won numerous Fringe First Awards. And we sort of developed a show that does not feel like a one-man show. I teach one-man show classes in New York and at the Actors Center in London, and they tend to be, I was born, blah, 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 blah. And I kind of just wanted to do something that was a cross between stand-up and improv and storytelling, which is sort of a really big thing in the States right now. Storytelling is all the rage. And that's kind of what wound up happening. Yeah. Okay. And in some weird ways, since I was lambasted in the UK press as well as internationally for the musical, seriously I doubted my own ability as a writer and as a funny writer. And this show has, Desperately Seeking the Exit has completely proven that, at least to the audience, or at least to what I hear from the audience, that I do know how to write, and I am a funny writer. And it's also sparked some interest in the reviving of the musical itself.
Okay.
So that's an unexpected twist.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Now, very briefly, some of our listeners may not know how the Free Fringe works. Can you just give us a quick overview? Yeah,
a third of the shows are free in the festival. 2,700 shows this year, so I cannot do math, but that's
900.
900 shows are free. There's two different branches of the Free Festival. There's the PBH and there's the Laughing Horse, which is the one that I am in. Each one of them works with various venues, and you basically apply to... I applied to the Laughing Horse first, giving them a short synopsis of the show and my history and stuff like that. And then you basically pick, at least with Laughing Horse, you pick your top 3 times and your top 3 venues. And then a few weeks later, you find out you got the best time of all and the worst venue of all. Or vice versa. You got the best venue, but you're at 2 in the morning.
Yeah.
I'm very lucky because my venue turned out to be something I liked. It's the Edinburgh City Football Club, which one would not normally think is the right location for a show about a musical. But it turned out to be really perfect. As I've seen so many shows here, you can see there's a show playing in my neighborhood in a liquor store. They're like just doing it in the aisles of a liquor store. None of the critics, none of the audience expects any sort of glamour from any of the venues. They're going to see the work itself. So I did a lot of research, though, and I would definitely recommend anybody, well, it might be a bit late, but anybody who's planning on coming to the Fringe, or if you have a chance to at least go to Edinburgh, before you book your show, check out these venues, because it'll really give you a sense of where it is in the city, what type of people are around that area when you're flyering, as you know, is a large portion of your day. And you pay a fee to the Laughing Horse or PBH, and you pay a fee to the festival as well. And then you just ask for money at the end of your show, and the audiences are very much expecting to do that.
Yeah. Okay. So what would you say would be the benefits either way for a first time, particularly a solo show? I would imagine the Free Fringe is probably beneficial for coming up. I mean, because obviously there are some people who are saying, well, what if I don't get any audiences, or the audiences aren't very generous, then I'm not going to make any money. But equally, of course, if you charge ticket fees, people might go, well, I don't know who you are, I'm not paying to see you in the first place.
It's funny, I have a number of friends, Americans here. We've all become friends through a USA to Edinburgh Facebook group. There's about 130 people on the group. And many of us are in the paid venues, and many of us are in the free venues. And the other day, one of the Americans said, I'm really worried. I'm getting box office reports now. They move the time of their show, and I can tell who's coming to the show. And tonight I have 3 people, and I'm worried about that. And turns out that night she had a full house. In the Free Fringe, you don't know how many people are coming. You don't even know which critics are coming because they can't make a reservation. But I said to this performer, when was the last time you made a reservation for a show? She says, I've never made one here. I said, exactly. I have never made a reservation for a show either. I always get my tickets last minute. I go to the box office of the Assembly or the Gilded or whatever it is, and I get my tickets there. So, hi. There's very many friendly people roaming around Fringe Central, which is a major place that everybody who's coming to the Fringe needs to know about.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's ridiculous if you don't come here because it's full of fantastic information. You're schmoozing with people without even trying. There's delicious coffee, computers, internet, printers, all that stuff. So, yeah, you don't know who's coming to your show, and you don't know who's coming to your show if you're paid either. I think the only benefit is this. If you're coming from far away, you make your money every single day at the end of your show, even if it's £20. If it's 5 people giving just a little couple of pence here or whatever, you don't have to go to the ATM and withdraw money, which really adds up, especially if you're a foreign traveler. You're paying lots of fees, and you wind up paying more in the end. So my goal was to make enough money every single day that I'd never have to go to the ATM, or the hole in the wall, as they call it here. And I also know that if you're in the paid venues, there is a benefit. With the paid venues, Assembly, Gilded Balloon, Underbelly, you have a greater visibility because those venues are promoting you a bit more,
Sure.
with massive posters and signage everywhere. The Free Fringe, you're sort of on your own to promote your own show and hang your own posters and put out your own flyers. But I believe everybody does that even in the paid venues.
Yeah.
You don't get paid from the paid venues right away. Some people don't get paid until October or November. So you have to know that you're not going to be flying home.
The Fringe will pay. I think it's sometimes as much as a couple of months afterwards.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm quite lucky in the Spaces. I get Space ticket money that night.
Oh,
so
wow.
they're a little different, but a lot of them won't. A lot of them will do the same. They'll bank transfer you at the end of the run.
And you're also paying fees for the ticketing office that manages your tickets, I believe.
Quite often, yeah. Again, Space is quite reasonable on that. They take 10p
clearly
off
I found the wrong place.
There are some of them are do take larger cuts, and you also have the up, which I've discussed with Charles in another conversation. You have the upfront or split.
Yes.
Payment schemes. So listeners for payment schemes, listen to my conversation with Charles Pamment in the other episode of this, because that's really worthwhile.
Yeah, and you also have to deal with the VAT taxes in a different way. With the free, I don't have to deal with any taxes. I don't have to claim anything at all. And it also affects if you use music in your show in any way. Like I use you can use music for free, recorded music that's by famous artists or something, before your show and after your show, because it's pre-show music and it's post-show music. But if you're using any sort of real, not original music in your show, you get a little bit of a better deal if it's in the free.
Right. Okay, fair enough. Yeah. And how does it work out in terms of fee? Do you know, between a free Fringe venue and a paid Fringe venue? Because obviously, are the free Fringe venues cheaper, or
I do not know. I did not investigate that. I mean, it's like people say to me, "My God, you paid for this room?" And I said, "No, I just paid to be in the Laughing Horse." And I have to say, Laughing Horse, they are terrific at publicizing shows. I mean, Alex Petty is someone to know. He runs Laughing Horse. He runs a number of venues all around the city, and he is constantly retweeting people's stars and has a full updates your own page for you as soon as you're. I mean, sometimes I come home to find out that my reviews are already listed on my show page.
Excellent.
Because he does that. It is exhausting to do all that work. You do sort of, you got your Google alerts, and you're sort of dreading reading it, or I saw something last night, Desperately Seeking the Exit, 2 stars, and I went, oh, who is that from? That's crazy. I can't go back to 2. I've been getting 4. You get a little spoiled with the star system here, which they're talking about abolishing, which is going to make the posters look very different next year.
It is. I don't think it's necessarily a bad idea, though, but that's an entirely different conversation.
I agree. But it turns out somebody was using the title of my show in a review of someone else's show that they couldn't stand. They were desperately seeking the exit.
Okay. That's,
yeah.
Oops.
Yeah. I don't know if it's in Mark Fisher's book or also Ian Fox's book. He wrote a great book about the Fringe. I think his book is great if you're in the comedy world and the stand-up world specifically. But it's a much more lighthearted look at the Fringe with some very funny stories about other people who have been at the Fringe. He says to never read your reviews. I cannot agree with that. I feel two things. If you don't read them, then you don't know about the good ones.
True.
Unless someone tells you. And sometimes performers are not as generous in telling you, oh, you got a 5-star review after they've just gotten a 2.
Yeah.
And then the other side of it is, I think you really do learn something from reading your reviews, especially early on. There's a number of reviewing outlets here that come very early in your run. Even when your show is in previews, clearly listed, like my first show ever in Edinburgh. And 2 reviewers came from the same publication. And, they said, they gave a note. Not a note. There was an observation they both had that dealt with the beginning of my show. And I realized from that, the next day I completely changed the beginning of my show. Which I don't think I would have done had I not read it in print.
Sure.
And so that really made a big difference to me. The reviews are interesting. I mean, people talk about, when they get a bad review, oh, it's just some student reviewer from blah, blah, blah. They're not even a name. Nobody cares. But if they got a 5-star review from that same student reviewer, they'd be here at Fringe Central running off copies and splattering them all over town as well. I got a terrible review from the Scotsman, a 1-star review from the Scotsman, which was really shocking. But that was because they sent the wrong reviewer to my show. She is somebody who does not appreciate the kind of thing that I'm doing at all. It's so not her cup of tea. Just like I've seen shows that I've read great things about and I have no interest in them at all. They're not for me.
Yeah.
So you have to take the good with the bad. The 1 stars, nobody will read. The 5 stars, nobody will read. It's only up to you to promote those stars as much as you possibly can.
Absolutely.
And trust that the audience is going to see shows that actually interest them, whether they have 5 stars or 2 stars.
Quite. Well, I know you're a busy man, and we're coming to the end of our time.
Oh my gosh, that went so fast.
That was quarter of an hour already.
I feel like I haven't given any other advice.
No, it's been helpful. Every little helps, and I think it's more about experience as much as anything else. You're somebody who's been up here and you've had this experience.
Well, it's my first time, really. I was here a couple of years ago just doing directing something, very small piece in a piano bar. I was only here for a few days, but I learned a little bit during that. And for this one, I honestly can say I researched the heck out of every single element of this. I would recommend, if you don't have a social media, if you're not on Twitter, you need to get on it right now. If it's November, get on it now.
Definitely.
Don't tweet, don't create, if you already are on Twitter, don't create a new account with the name of your show. It should just be you. And start looking at the hashtags, Ed Fringe, Edinburgh. All this stuff is going to start happening, really cooking in January and February is when it all starts.
Absolutely,
it's a 6-month, really long process to get here. And you will start making connections, and you will start finding out about shows that you want to see. And then you'll have relationships with those people, and then those people will see your show, and every punter counts.
And particularly once you've sorted your own venue out, include them in a couple of your tweets as well, because that way you get all of the people that are going there themselves start following you, and you're show swapping before you even reach Edinburgh.
Absolutely. Twitter is, I think all social media is called social media for a reason. It's social. You have to have a dialogue with people. It's not about selling your stuff. Ask questions, I found my house manager, which I also recommend for a free show, that you have somebody who's going to be there for the first half hour of your show, 15 before it starts, 15 after, to help the latecomers and to help guide people, because free venues don't have front of house staff. Paid venues normally do.
Yeah.
And it puts the audience at ease in some way, and I think for me it put me at ease knowing that there was somebody else handling my audience.
Understood.
And I found that person on Twitter.
Right.
And I could not be happier with who I got. Flyers, some people look for a flyering team. A team is great only if they've seen your show.
Yeah. Agreed.
Many people do not have their team seeing their show, so they're not really selling that person's
And I would
show.
say if you're going to do that, try and get if you get one, if you're lucky enough to get one, get your team into a dress rehearsal so that they can see the show before your run starts.
Absolutely, yeah. Get here early. Even I got here the day before the Fringe started because I was doing my show in Manchester. And I got here the day before, and I really wish I would have gotten here 2 days earlier.
Right.
Just to run the show a couple of times in the space, make some new observations about how it works, to flyer before everybody else does.
Yeah.
When you go to venues and you're like, oh, there's perfect prime spot for my poster on that wall that's now covered with.
And also
25
getting
other
into
shows.
the newsagents and places like that, because they will all put up a certain number of flyers and they can only fit so many in, and then
Yeah.
they close their doors.
Yeah.
And I got up here on the 1st of August, I was in Edinburgh at 3:30, I was out by 5 o'clock with my posters, and half the newsagents were already full.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
do
It's
it
really,
very early
it's
on.
really, it's very early on. And also, speaking of doing things early on, for the love of God, don't bring a brand new show to the Fringe. Do it a few times before you get here. Many reasons for that. One is you'll find out what works and doesn't work.
Yep.
We call it a preview, an out-of-town preview.
Indeed,
in
and
the
it's
States.
done for a reason.
Do that. And, if you can, like I did the show in New York in May. And this starts in August, right? But you have to get your postcards printed. The deadline is the middle of May. And then, because they're printing up 2,700 cards there's like 8 printers in Scotland. You find good deals, like Laughing Horse, for example, has a great deal with Tenfold, who actually does the whole package for you, the postcards and the posters, leaves them at your venue, leaves a number of the posters and postcards out of the box so that the venue can hang them up before you even get to town.
Oh, that's good.
Fantastic deal. But it really helped for me to have 4 great pull quotes across the top of this card for a brand new show at the Edinburgh Fringe from the run I did in New York.
Yeah.
Nobody knows here what the Advocate is. Nobody knows what Kenneth and the 212. I mean, they know what they are in New York City, but here they don't. But still, seeing words like hilarious, mind-boggling at the top of a card does kind of help. And then make sure that you design your postcards in a way that you have room to stick on the new reviews that you're going to get here. So I basically covered the entire top of my postcards that had all the American reviews with all the reviews from Scotland.
Yeah.
And it's very time consuming, and you'll use a lot of glue stick and you'll use a lot of blue tack, but that's how we work.
Absolutely.
That's how it works.
I've seen too many shows around actually where they've had to plaster over their title with the review, and you think, right, well, that's a great review. What's the show?
Yeah, and then a lot of people, this is just me, a lot of people use the stapler, stapling little fortune cookie type strips of paper onto their... I just think it's sort of sloppy. I just feel like just use a glue stick, and it's very easy to just mock something up on Word and print it out and cut it up and glue it on. So it has some sort of, professionalism to it. I think that's important. But the other side of it is people see this dangling chad, this dangling, that's an American term, this dangling piece of paper, and they go, oh, they must have gotten something, and then that gets their attention too. There's so many ways to go.
Yeah.
You have to network, you have to meet people, you have to find a group of people to be supportive of you while you're here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Couldn't
it's
agree with
really
that more.
important. We've become friends, bumping into each other at Fringe Central at
Indeed.
least twice a week.
Yeah, definitely.
Unfortunately, we haven't been able to see each other's shows. Lots
No,
of
that's
shows.
the tragedy of the
conflict.
Fringe. You will clash with an awful lot.
Yeah,
There you
clash.
go. Well, I need to make a move in a minute anyway, if I'm going to see this show.
You're a busy man.
I am. One tip, then, your top tip for each of, and it could be the same one, but for each of a show coming up for the first time, be it solo or group, and a solo show coming up.
Oh, interesting. Well, my top tip for a solo show, again, it's to make sure that you have people who are going to support you while you're here in the city. A solo show isn't really a solo show. The audience is the other actor in the show.
Absolutely.
Right? But in your own head, you're flying solo. You are really on your own. And it can be very depressing. It can be terrifying. It can be thrilling. Be prepared to know that you will go through ups and downs every minute of every single day. You do not know what will be hurled your way. And for groups, you have to make sure you're all on the same page and everybody knows what they're getting themselves into. It's a massive investment, people. You are on a world stage. You are being seen by everybody. And things are going to happen for you from doing your show at the Edinburgh Fringe that you do not expect. So you just expect the unexpected, come in with an open mind, try to be as positive as you possibly can, and again, the only way to do that is just surround yourself with positive people who are all on the same page.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, Peter Michael Marino, thank you very much indeed for your time.
It is a pleasure chatting with you, and I'll see you again tomorrow, I'm sure.
Indeed, probably so. Well, I hope you agree with me that those interviews were extremely educational and helpful to anybody who is planning on taking a show to the Edinburgh Fringe. I would like to give a few more tips of my own, simply because there are several mistakes that I have made or observed while I have been up there, and I think that they probably could be avoided with a little bit of help. The first thing, there are several little tips that I will give with regards to actually taking care of yourself while you are up there. Firstly, keep warm. Bring a scarf and warm clothing, particularly if you're actually going to be staying out late for any reason, if you have a late show or if you're planning on going to see shows. Sometimes you can have weather like we did this last summer, where it's actually remarkably sunny most of the time. Nevertheless, it does get very cold in Edinburgh, and some people have been known to underestimate that. So make sure that you have clothing required to actually keep you warm. In the same token, look after your voice. Make sure that you keep your voice warm as well. Warm up in the mornings. As I said last week, keep things like pineapple, manuka honey and lemon around. And don't stay out late or drink or yell all of the time. Make sure that you actually pace yourself, because if you spend too much time making too much noise, Edinburgh is one place where you can suddenly lose your voice without ever having seen it going. And the theme of pace yourself on the mile as well. If you're out on your own, you can only work for so long without hurting your performance. If you're out with a large group, make sure that you actually give people shifts and give performers time off to actually rest before they start a performance. So maybe the production team could go out for the last hour and a half or 2 hours to do the flyering then, so that the performers can rest and give the best performance. Also hydrate. You lose an awful lot of fluid while you're out on the mile, and you can damage your voice very quickly. Quick sips are better than long drinks when you're hydrating, so take quick sips often, and make sure you keep a bottle of water on you so that when you suddenly feel that your voice is tired or that your throat is dry, you're not panicking to try and find somewhere or having to pay out lots of money to get drinks. Finally, in that vein, get lots of sleep. This is an extraordinarily draining experience, and I don't think a lot of people actually realise how so until they get up there. I know it's very, very tempting when you're somewhere like this to go crazy and just spend all your time out seeing shows, but do make sure that you have time to sleep. It's a very, very important thing to do, believe me. With regards to selling your show, have a hook that sells your show in 5 seconds. When you're out on the Royal Mile, that's usually all you're going to get. People are walking up and down, there are different flyers every 2 feet, and everyone is shouting their show details to everybody that's listening, and indeed many people who aren't. If you can sell your show to someone in 5 seconds, they're much more likely to pay attention and maybe ask you to talk about it in greater detail than someone who starts a 20-second spiel and that person's gone before they've even heard what the show is about. Also bear in mind that you're fighting an awful lot of people who are doing sketch comedy shows or improv, and when you're doing that kind of thing, there's often not an awful lot to say about your show other than the fact that it is improvised, because you don't know exactly what it's going to be. You can talk about previous shows, sure, but it means that you can sell that show very, very quickly, and the audience knows what they're going to get, or within reason, within about 6 words. So bear in mind, if you're doing a complicated show, you have that kind of thing to compete with. Also be ready to alter your pitch at short notice. Depending on the audience you get, some people could actually want to talk about your show at length. Other people may respond to a different kind of approach. So if you're selling a show that's actually primarily comedy but has a serious element or is maybe based on a piece of literature, be ready to talk about that book very quickly if it catches somebody's eye. You also get people who will actually challenge you when you're flyering. I have mentioned before on this podcast, I had one lady in 2011 who said to me, "You've got 20 seconds to sell your show, and if you do it, I'll take a flyer. Go." And her daughter actually looked at her watch and started timing me. In my case, I managed to do it in 18 and a half, but you do get that kind of challenge from people. Think a very long time before you hire somebody to flyer for you. From what I've heard from various different people, that can be a very mixed experience. Is it worth the money for you? If it's a friend, well, make sure that they've seen a few rehearsals so that they know what they're actually selling, and preferably enjoy the medium themselves, not just somebody who's come along for the ride and isn't particularly into whatever you're doing. because they'll do a much better job of selling your show. If you're going to get a professional flyerer, well then that's something to think about, because some professional flyerers don't actually do your show justice because they're simply there to get rid of flyers. Others I've heard who are actually really effective, so it can be a simple question of finding the right show for the right person, or finding somebody who's dedicated and wants to actually promote people who are on the Edinburgh Fringe, instead of just get paid to do some easy work. With regards to flyers, check printers very, very carefully before you use them, by which I mean printing companies. I won't name any names, but there is one printer up at the Edinburgh Fringe who has been known to deliver substandard products and indeed deliver late as well. They've done both to me. I didn't use them this last year, but I met some people who had used them, and I identified, as soon as they said they'd had trouble with their printing company, I identified that printer. As I say, I won't mention names, but make sure you check people out and look at testimonials. If you can, speak to people who have actually used those printers before for the Edinburgh Festival, because a lot of print companies get a lot more orders in for the festival than they are used to. Also, while you're up there, locate your nearest stationer. You may need to print extra flyers or some extra promotional material, or you may want to print out reviews to go onto your flyers. You can go to Fringe Central to do that, but it can be, if it's a last-minute thing, impossible to get there. So be ready to find a stationer's, a Ryman's. There are plenty of Ryman's around Edinburgh, and you can nip into one of those and get some printing done quickly and relatively inexpensively. One thing that seems to be an increasing trend is laminated posters. I've seen an awful lot of these going around, and that is quite an expensive thing to do if you're doing it for too many. I think it's a good idea if you're somewhere like the Space, because they have spaces outside their venues for posters only going up for Space shows. That's a really good idea, because that poster isn't going to get damaged when it's out in the rain overnight. So maybe laminate a few for that purpose, but there is no point in laminating anything that is going to go on the Royal Mile, because that poster will only be visible for half an hour before someone else has stuck another flyer over it anyway. So it's not actually worth the money to try and protect those posters any more than simply maybe having a finish. On that note, think about doing something different with your flyers. Some things go down well, others don't. I did landscape posters this year, which didn't go down particularly well with the venues because they were actually really difficult to fit into their slots. They count on everybody using portrait style. So maybe be careful about doing something like that. It also limits your options if you want to actually pay to have your posters put up permanently around Edinburgh, which you can do. There are companies that will actually have stock spaces all around the city, and you can pay for a duration to actually have your poster kept there, and it will be there the whole time, and people are not allowed to flyer over the top of that. Doesn't necessarily stop them, but it's greater protection than you'll get on the Mile. However, I did, for example, see one company this year who had actually printed their posters onto wood. They used hardboard, I think it was, and I saw one hanging up in a cafe. I wouldn't advise that for the Royal Mile, but actually if you're going to put things up in a cafe, that's rather a good idea because it stands out from the rest of the flyers. In fact, that one was right at the top near the ceiling, which is something that wouldn't normally catch my eye, but this one did. Finally, I think one thing that is worth keeping in mind is making sure that you have contracts for your show, and I mean two different kinds. Firstly, for the rights to the show. If you're doing a show that has already been written, make sure that you actually have the appropriate rights to perform that show at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. I haven't spoken to anybody who has tried to do a show without doing that, but I imagine it would probably end badly if people got wind of it. So make sure that you have purchased the rights that you need. And also make sure that you have contracts amongst your performers and crew. I think that's actually really important, so that you make sure that everybody is in full agreement of what they're being paid or what they've agreed to do during the course of the Edinburgh Fringe. The more professional your production, the more important it is that you actually have that kind of thing in place. If you're looking at putting on a show with equity actors, they probably won't even be interested if you don't draw up a contract for them in many cases. So bear that in mind. And with that, I will end my sermon. Well, that's going to be it from me for this week, and probably for a little while now. I've got a few bits and pieces I need to do over here in Toronto, a couple of episodes in mind, but nothing planned for the very near future. So for the time being, I will say farewell. In the meantime, I promise to be in touch if I see anything fantastic over here in Toronto, and I'm sure that I will be speaking to you all again very soon. In the meantime, I wish you a slightly belated, very happy New Year, and I hope that 2013 brings a joyful and musical time for all of you. Farewell for now. this episode of Musical Talk, presented and edited by David Kingsmill. The Musical Talk theme and variations are copyright David Kingsmill 2012. This is Musical Talk.